Life has a way of teaching you harsh lessons about family and money. I learned mine at age 35, standing in my parents' backyard during what was supposed to be a joyful family reunion. Instead, it became the day everything fell apart. I'm Dr. Emma Mitchell, and until that Sunday afternoon, I thought I had everything figured out. After 15 years of hard work, medical school, residency, and finally establishing my own practice, I had reached a point of financial stability. My small pediatric clinic in downtown Boston was thriving, and my pension fund had just hit $550,000. It wasn't a fortune by medical standards, but it represented every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every missed holiday I'd endured to become the doctor I am today. The trouble started 3 weeks before the reunion when my younger brother Michael called. You need to come to the reunion this year," he said, his voice unusually serious. "Mom and Dad, they're struggling. The mortgage, their medical bills, it's getting tough." I sighed, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "Mike, I already help them with the bills every month. I send them $2,000 like clockwork." "I know, sis, but it's not enough anymore. They're talking about possibly losing the house." The guilt trip worked, as it always did. I agreed to attend the reunion, breaking my usual rule of avoiding large family gatherings. Ever since I'd become successful, these events had turned into uncomfortable discussions about money, with various relatives hinting or outright asking for loans they never intended to repay. The day of the reunion arrived bright and sunny, a perfect New England summer afternoon. I parked my modest Honda Civic in front of my parents' colonial house. The same one I'd grown up in, the same one they were now claiming they might lose. The front yard was already filled with cars, and I could hear laughter and music from the backyard. I smoothed down my simple blue sundress, checked my reflection in the car window, and took a deep breath. Just a few hours, I told myself. Make an appearance, say hello to everyone, then make an excuse about an early morning at the clinic. Mom spotted me first as I walked through the side gate. "Emma, you made it." She hurried over, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of her familiar lavender perfume. But something felt off. Her embrace was too tight, her smile a bit too bright. "Hi, Mom," I said, pulling back slightly. "The yard looks beautiful. Those new roses." "Oh yes," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "Your father splurged a bit at the garden center. You know how he gets with his gardening." I did know. Dad's gardening splurges had been a source of tension for years. He'd spend hundreds on exotic plants only to watch them die because he refused to follow proper care instructions. Just another example of their questionable financial decisions. The backyard was packed with relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and their kids were scattered across the lawn. Some playing cornhole, others clustered around the grill where my father stood in his kiss the cook apron. My brother Mike was there with his wife Sophie and their twins, who were chasing each other with water guns. Dr. Emma, my cousin Tina's voice carried across the yard, still saving lives and making the big bucks. I forced a smile, already regretting my decision to come. This was how it always started, the casual references to my income, the not-so-subtle digs about my profession. Never mind that I'd worked my way through med school, taken out massive loans, and spent years paying them off. In their eyes, I was just the rich doctor who didn't share enough. "The clinic keeps me busy," I replied neutrally, making my way to the drinks table. I desperately needed something stronger than lemonade, but I stuck with water. I needed to keep my wits about me. Dad approached as I was filling my cup, his face serious despite the festive atmosphere. "Emma, honey, got a minute? Your mother and I need to talk to you about something important." "Here it comes," I thought, my stomach tightening. "Sure, Dad. Lead the way." He guided me into his study, Mom following close behind. The room was exactly as I remembered it from childhood. Walls lined with books he never read, his prized golf trophies on display from a club membership they couldn't afford, and the large mahogany desk that had been his father's. Mom closed the door behind us, and the sounds of the party became muffled. On the desk, I noticed my framed medical license, the one I'd given them years ago when I first opened my practice. Why was it out? "Emma, sweetie," Mom began, perching on the edge of the desk. "We've been doing some thinking about the future, about security and family responsibility." I remained standing, arms crossed. "What kind of thinking?" Dad cleared his throat. "We've been looking at our finances, and things are, well, they're not good. The mortgage payments have gone up, And with your mother's arthritis treatments. I know, I interrupted. That's why I send money every month. $2,000 without fail. And we appreciate that, honey, Mom jumped in. But we've been talking to Uncle Steve. You know he used to work in finance, and he mentioned something interesting about your pension fund. My blood ran cold. Uncle Steve, my father's younger brother, was notorious for giving terrible financial advice that had already bankrupted two of my cousins. What about my pension fund? Well, Dad continued, his voice taking on that reasonable tone he used when trying to sell someone on a bad idea. Steve says that at your age, you don't really need to worry about retirement yet. You've got plenty of time to build it back up. But we need help now. What exactly are you asking? I knew the answer, but I needed to hear them say it. Mom reached for my hand. I pulled back. Sweetheart, we're your parents. We sacrificed everything to put you through college, to support your dream of becoming a doctor. Now we're asking you to help us in return. Your pension fund, it's just sitting there, gathering dust. Gathering dust? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's my retirement savings, Mom. And what do you mean you sacrificed everything for my education? I worked my way through college. I took out loans. I lived on ramen noodles and worked 2 jobs during pre-med. Now, Emma, Dad's voice hardened. Don't be disrespectful. We gave you a roof over your head, food on the table. The basics of parenting? I shot back. Should I be eternally indebted to you for doing the minimum required by law? Mom's face crumpled in that familiar way that used to send guilt shooting through me. Not this time. How can you be so cruel? After everything we've done for you? We're not asking for all of it, just enough to pay off the house and maybe set up a small nest egg for ourselves. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just enough? The house mortgage is $300,000, and you want a nest egg on top of that? You're basically asking for my entire pension fund. It's what good daughters do. Dad's voice rose. They take care of their parents. I do take care of you. $2,000 every month, plus I pay for Mom's last 3 medical procedures. But this is insane. I turned to leave, but Dad moved to block the door. We're not done discussing this. Yes, we are. I tried to step around him. I'm not giving you my pension fund. End of discussion. Then you leave us no choice, Mom said, her voice suddenly cold. She picked up my framed medical license from the desk. We'll have to tell everyone what kind of daughter you really are. I turned back to face her. What are you talking about? About the money you stole from us in college, Dad said. About the credit card bills. My jaw dropped. Excuse me? What credit card bills? The ones you racked up in our names, Mom said. We have proof. Now I understood. They were trying to blackmail me with lies. I pulled out my phone, quickly navigating to my photo album. Ewing's credit card bills. I pulled up pictures I'd kept for years, just in case. The ones with your signatures, buying luxury items while I worked minimum wage jobs to pay for my textbooks. Their faces paled. I wasn't supposed to have evidence. I wasn't supposed to be able to fight back. Let's go share this with everyone, shall we? I moved toward the door again. I'm sure Uncle Steve would be very interested in seeing where his investment advice money really went. You ungrateful little. Dad grabbed my medical license from Mom's hands. Before I could react, he yanked open the study door and stormed into the backyard. I followed, my heart pounding. Everyone, he shouted, drawing the attention of the entire party. Look at your successful doctor cousin. Look at how she treats her family. The gathering fell silent as Dad held up my medical license. She'd rather keep her precious pension fund than help her own parents. After everything we sacrificed. Robert, don't, Mom started, but it was too late. With a dramatic flourish, Dad threw my framed medical license at me. I managed to catch it before it hit my face, the glass cracking in my hands. You're just a selfish doctor who forgot where she came from, he screamed, his face red with rage. All that money, and you can't even help your own family. The silence that followed was deafening. Relatives stood frozen, drinks and paper plates in hand, staring at the scene unfolding before them. My brother Mike stepped forward, looking uncertain. Dad, maybe we should. No. Dad cut him off. Everyone needs to know the truth about their precious Dr. Emma. How she hoards her money while her parents struggle. How she... Enough. My voice cut through his tirade. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I looked around at the shocked faces of my relatives, at my mother's tears, at my father's rage. "You want the truth?" I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. "Let's tell them the truth. All of it, starting with these." I pulled out my phone again, this time opening a folder I'd labeled Family Financial Records. Years of documented transfers, receipts, and bank statements. "But first," I continued, looking directly at my father, "let me tell you about how I really put myself through medical school." I connected my phone to the large TV on my parents' patio, the one they'd bought last Christmas despite their supposed financial troubles. My hands were steady now, anger replacing the shock and hurt. The backyard remained silent except for the distant sound of children playing inside the house. My brother Mike had wisely ushered all the kids indoors. "Since we're airing family business," I said, my voice clear and controlled, "let's start with my freshman year of college." The first bank statement appeared on the screen, September 2006, showing my part-time cafeteria job deposits, $425.86, $389.23, $401.55, barely enough to cover my textbooks. While I was working in the college cafeteria, I continued serving meals to other students and studying during my breaks. Interesting charges were appearing on a credit card I didn't know existed. I swiped to the next document, a credit card statement in my name, but with charges I'd never made. Designer boutiques, golf equipment, spa treatments. "Mom, Dad, would you like to explain the $3,000 spent at Elite Golf Supplies when I was supposedly draining the family finances?" My father's face had lost its angry flush, replaced by a sickly pallor. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. "Or how about this?" Another swipe. "The cruise you took during my sophomore year, the one you told relatives you had to skip because of Emma's college expenses. 12 days in the Caribbean, $8,500 charged to a card in my name." Aunt Patricia gasped. She'd been the one who organized a food drive at her church for our struggling family that year. "Emma, stop this," Mom pleaded. "You're embarrassing the family." "No, Mom, you embarrassed the family when you committed credit card fraud using your daughter's name." My cousin Tina stepped forward, her earlier snark replaced by confusion. "But you told everyone Emma's education was bankrupting you. You borrowed money from half the family to help with her tuition." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, we're getting to that." I pulled up more documents. "Here's my scholarship letter. Full academic scholarship covering 75% of my tuition. Here are my student loan documents for the rest. And here," I paused for effect, "are the checks relatives wrote to help with Emma's education being deposited into my parents' personal account." The backyard erupted in angry voices. Uncle Steve, who'd apparently loaned them $15,000 for my medical school expenses, looked like he might have a stroke. Aunt Marie was demanding to know about the $10,000 she'd given them for my residency housing. "But wait," I said, raising my voice above the chaos. "There's more. Let's talk about my residency years." More documents appeared on the screen. Bank statements showing my $45,000 residence salary, barely enough to cover rent and living expenses in Boston. And alongside them, loan applications in my name, loans I'd never taken out. While I was working 80-hour weeks at the hospital, sleeping in on-call rooms, and eating hospital cafeteria food, my parents were taking out personal loans using my information. Do you want to know what they spent it on? I didn't wait for an answer. The next images showed receipts, home renovations, luxury car payments, country club memberships. By the time I discovered what they'd done, they'd racked up over $100,000 in fraudulent debt in my name. Debt I paid off over 5 years while building my practice because I couldn't bear the thought of my own parents going to jail for fraud. My father finally found his voice. We were going to pay it back." "Really?" I turned to face him. "Like you paid back Uncle Steve, or Aunt Marie, or any of the other relatives you scammed using my name." Mom was crying now, real tears replacing her earlier performance. "We just wanted to give you a good life." "A good life." I was shouting now, years of pent-up anger finally breaking free. "You stole my identity. You took loans in my name. You lied to our entire family of supporting me while I was working myself to exhaustion just to survive." Mike stepped forward, his face ashen. Is this why you never came home during residency? Why you always made excuses during holidays?" I nodded, feeling tears start to form. I couldn't face it. Couldn't face them using me as their excuse while they lived beyond their means. Couldn't face more relatives telling me how generous our parents were, sacrificing everything for my education. The TV screen now showed current bank statements, my monthly transfers to my parents, $2,000, regular as clockwork. Payments for medical procedures, property taxes, car repairs. And still, because they're my parents, I've been helping them. $2,000 every month for the past 5 years. But it's never enough, is it? I turned back to my parents. Now you want my pension fund too. We're your parents, Dad said weakly. Family helps family. Family doesn't steal from family. Uncle Steve roared, finally finding his voice. You use your own daughter's identity to commit fraud, then have the nerve to ask for her pension fund. Aunt Marie was already on her phone, presumably calculating how much they'd borrowed from her over the years. Other relatives were doing the same, the magnitude of my parents' deception finally becoming clear. My brother Mike looked devastated. Mom, Dad, how could you? Oh, should we tell him about his college fund? I asked, pulling up another document. The one relatives contributed to for years. Want to explain where that money went. Mom lunged for my phone. Emma, stop. But Mike was faster. What college fund? The one with over $50,000 in it by the time you graduated high school, I said softly. The one they emptied to pay off their credit card debt. Why do you think they pushed you so hard to take a few years off before college? They needed time to hide the evidence. Mike staggered back like he'd been physically struck. His wife Sophie caught his arm, her face a mask of fury as she glared at our parents. The backyard had descended into chaos. Relatives were arguing, demanding explanations, calculating debts. Through it all, my parents stood frozen, their carefully constructed facade finally crumbling. I looked down at my cracked medical license still in my hands. Years of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication reflected in that simple piece of paper. Work I had done entirely on my own, despite their best efforts to profit from it. I'm done, I announced, my voice cutting through the noise. Done with the lies, done with the manipulation, done with all of it. I pulled out my checkbook, the one they'd been eyeing hopefully when I arrived, and wrote a check. My last check to them. Here's your $2,000 for this month, I said, placing it on the patio table. It's the last payment you'll ever get from me. If you come near my pension fund or try to take out any more loans in my name, I'll press charges for fraud. All the evidence is documented. You can't do this to us. Dad's voice cracked. We'll lose the house. Maybe it's time you lived within your means for once, I replied. Sell the house. Pay back the relatives you scammed. Get jobs. Jobs? Mom looked horrified. At our age. You're both healthy 60-year-olds who've never held real jobs because you were too busy living off others. Yes, jobs. I turned to address our shell-shocked relatives. I'm sorry you all got caught up in their schemes. I tried to protect them, to pay off their debts quietly, to keep helping despite everything they'd done. But I can't do it anymore. Uncle Steve stepped forward. Don't apologize, Emma. We're the ones who should be sorry. We believed their lies about you. All these years. Aunt Marie hugged me, whispering, We had no idea, sweetheart. No idea what you were going through. One by one, relatives came forward, not to demand money or explanations, but to offer support. My cousin Tina, who'd made the snide comment earlier, was openly crying. Through it all, my parents stood alone, watching their web of lies unravel. 30 years of manipulation and fraud, exposed in 20 minutes of bank statements and receipts. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and family drama. After the revelations at the reunion, things moved quickly. Uncle Steve, ever the financial advisor despite his questionable investment tips, took charge of documenting all the money my parents had borrowed from relatives under false pretenses. The total was staggering, over $200,000, not counting interest. I was in my clinic, finishing up with a young patient's ear infection, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mike. They're selling the house. Not my choice. I wasn't surprised. The bank had finally caught up with their missed payments, and without my monthly checks, they couldn't keep up the pretense anymore. What did surprise me was the series of texts that followed. Found more credit cards in my name, from right after high school. You weren't their only victim, M. My hands shook as I read his messages. Of course they hadn't stopped with me. Why would they? I called him as soon as my last patient left. How bad is it? I asked, dreading the answer. Mike's bitter laugh told me everything. Remember that emergency when Sophie was pregnant with the twins? When they needed $20,000 for roof repairs? Let me guess. No roof repairs. Not even a loose shingle. But I did find credit card statements showing purchases at luxury resorts that same month, all under my name. I closed my eyes, feeling a fresh wave of guilt. Mike, I'm so sorry. If I'd exposed them sooner. Don't, he cut me off. Don't blame yourself for their actions. You tried to protect everyone just like you always do. But I think we need to press charges. The words hung heavy in the air. I've been dreading this conversation, knowing it would eventually come. There are parents, I said weakly, even though I knew he was right. Parents who committed identity theft against their own children. Parents who stole your future and mine. They need to face consequences, real ones. He was right. I knew he was right. But the thought of my parents in jail, even after everything they'd done, made my stomach churn. Before I could respond, my office door flew open. Mom stood there, mascara streaking down her face, looking like she aged 10 years in 2 weeks. I'll call you back, I told Mike quickly, ending the call. How could you do this to us? Mom's voice was raw and accusatory. The bank is foreclosing. Your father can't get out of bed. We're going to be homeless, and it's all your fault. I stood up slowly, maintaining the desk between us. How did you get past reception? I told them I was having a medical emergency. Your own mother reduced a line to see you. She collapsed into a chair, shoulders shaking with sobs. The sad thing was, I knew these tears were real, not like her performative crying at the reunion. My mother was genuinely devastated, not by what she'd done, but by facing the consequences of her actions. Mom, I kept my voice steady, professional. You need to leave. I have patience. Patience, she looked up, tears suddenly gone. You care more about strangers than your own mother. After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me? I couldn't help but laugh. You mean the identity theft? The fraud? The lies? We gave you life. She stood up, hands planted on my desk. We raised you. And this is how you repay us? By destroying our lives? No, Mom, you destroy your own lives. Years of living beyond your means, stealing from your children, lying to the family. Those were your choices. We had no choice. We deserved a good life. At the expense of everyone else. I walked to my office door, holding it open. You need to leave. Now, before I call security. Her face crumpled again. Please, Emma, we can work something out. Your father, he's talking about bankruptcy. We can't live like common poor people. The absurdity of her statement hit me hard. All those years of struggling through medical school, living on ramen noodles and working multiple jobs while they lived in luxury on stolen money. And now she couldn't face living like common poor people. You have 2 options, I said firmly. 1. Sell a house, downsize to something you can afford, get jobs, and start paying back the family you scammed. 2. Face criminal charges for identity theft and fraud. Mike's already found evidence of credit cards in his name. How many other relatives do you think will come forward once they start checking their credit reports? You wouldn't, she whispered. You wouldn't send your own parents to jail. Try me. She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps finally realizing that her manipulation tactics wouldn't work anymore. Then she straightened her shoulders, smoothed her designer dress, probably bought with stolen money, and walked to the door. But she couldn't resist one final jab. Your father was right about you, she said coldly. You're nothing but a selfish, heartless doctor who forgot where she came from. No wonder you're still single. Who could ever love someone so cold? The words were meant to hurt, and a few weeks ago they would have. But now they just made me sad. Sad for the little girl who grew up believing she was never enough. Sad for the young woman who worked herself to exhaustion while her parents stole her identity. Sad for the successful doctor who still sought approval from people who only saw her as an ATM. Goodbye, Mom, I said quietly, closing the door behind her. I canceled my remaining appointments for the day, something I'd never done before. My head nurse, Janet, took one look at my face and understood. Family? She asked sympathetically. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Go home, Dr. Mitchell. Get some rest. We'll reschedule everyone. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked around my modest apartment. I could have afforded something bigger, flashier, the kind of place my parents always pushed me to buy. A doctor should live in luxury, they'd say. You need to show your success. But I chosen this place deliberately. 2 bedrooms, comfortable but not extravagant, walking distance to the clinic. More importantly, well within my means, leaving room in my budget to build my pension fund and invest in my future. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mike. They took out life insurance policies on us without our knowledge. Found the documents in their filing cabinet. We need to talk. I stared at the message, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. Maybe Mom was right about one thing. I had forgotten where I came from. I'd forgotten the constant anxiety of checking my credit report, the sleepless nights wondering what new debt I'd discover in my name, the guilt of trying to protect them while they stole from everyone around them. It was time to remember. Time to act. Time to protect not just myself and Mike, but every other relative they might target next. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom, watching as my parents were sentenced for their crimes. The investigation had uncovered even more than we expected. Decades of financial fraud, identity theft involving not just Mike and me, but 3 other relatives, and a complex web of loans and credit cards that would take years to untangle. They looked smaller somehow, sitting at the defendant's table in their courthouse attire. Gone were the designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Dad's golf tan had faded, and Mom's carefully maintained highlights had grown out, showing her natural gray. They refused to look at me or Mike as the judge read their sentence. Robert and Diana Mitchell, this court sentences you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution to your victims in the amount of $487,000. Mom started crying as the bailiff approached, not the manipulative tears I'd grown up with, but real, broken sobs. Dad just looked defeated. As they were led away, Mom finally turned to look at me. I expected to see anger or accusation in her eyes. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before: shame. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and meetings. The house was sold at auction, with the proceeds going toward their restitution payments. Uncle Steve helped coordinate with other family members to document all the fraudulent loans and begin the long process of rebuilding damaged credit scores. You did the right thing, Mike told me over coffee, a month after the sentencing. It wasn't easy, but it was right. His twins were playing in my apartment's living room, their innocent laughter a reminder of why we'd had to take action. They deserved better than to grow up watching their grandparents scam and manipulate everyone around them. I know, I said, watching the kids play. I just wish that it hadn't come to this. Mike finished my thought. Me too. But they made their choices. For years, decades even. We just finally stopped enabling them. The family dynamics had shifted dramatically since the truth came out. Instead of being seen as the selfish doctor, I was now the one relatives came to for advice. Aunt Marie had asked me to help her daughter set up a budget for medical school. Uncle Steve consulted me before making investment decisions. Even my cousin Tina had apologized for years of snide comments about my privileged life. But the biggest change was in myself. The guilt that had weighed me down for years was finally lifting. I no longer felt responsible for my parents' financial well-being. My pension fund remained untouched, growing steadily for my own future. I'd even started dating again, no longer afraid that any potential partner would be scared off by my family drama. 1 year to the day after the reunion that changed everything, I received a letter from the prison. I recognized Mom's handwriting on the envelope. For a long time, I just held it, debating whether to open it. Finally, sitting in my favorite chair by the window, I broke the seal. Dear Emma, I don't expect you to forgive us. What we did to you and your brother was unforgivable. It's taken a year of therapy and prison reflection to understand the damage we caused. We were so focused on maintaining appearances, on living the life we thought we deserved, that we lost sight of what really mattered. We had 2 amazing children who worked hard and made something of themselves, and instead of being proud, we saw you as resources to exploit. I can't undo the past, can't erase the years of theft and lies, can't give you back the childhood you should have had. All I can say is that I'm sorry, truly sorry. Your father isn't ready to admit everything yet. Maybe he never will be, but I needed you to know that at least one of your parents finally understands what we did wrong. Take care of yourself. Keep building your future. And know that despite everything, I am proud of the strong woman you've become, not because of us, but despite us. Love. Mom. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Maybe someday I'd be ready to respond. Maybe not. For now, it was enough to know that they were facing their consequences, that the truth was finally out, and that I was free from the burden of their expectations and manipulations. My phone buzzed, a reminder about tomorrow's staff meeting at the clinic. Life went on. Patients needed care, bills needed paying, and futures needed planning. But for the first time in my adult life, the only future I had to worry about was my own. That evening, I looked at my framed medical license, now hanging proudly in my office, not the cracked one they'd thrown at me, but a new one. It represented everything I'd achieved on my own, every obstacle I'd overcome, every challenge I faced. The pension fund they tried to take. It was now part of a broader financial plan for my future, a future built on truth, hard work, and integrity. Everything they'd failed to teach me, but I'd learned anyway. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing that the people who should have protected you were the ones you needed protection from. But once you face that truth, you can finally begin to heal.